A topic of conversation that I have been hearing quite a bit for the past few years or so is that shaming should make a return. I've heard this discussion and this statement bring shaming back multiple times in many different contexts. Sometimes it's deserved. Sometimes it's just people and their judgment and their self righteousness, who many times are projecting their failure to measure up to their own standards. Oh, yeah, and to stir up a little drama, a little fake outrage, because what's the internet and what's life without a little drama, right? Now, shaming might feel like justice or social correcting, and it can be, but history and psychology show that misguided and a disproportionate amount of shame can often cause more harm than good. Let's talk about it. Let's check out good old Merriam Webster to get a clear definition of the word shame. Shame can be used as a noun or verb. So the noun definition states a painful emotion caused by consciousness of guilt, shortcoming, or impropriety. A condition of humiliating, disgrace, or disrepute. Something that brings censure or reproach, such as pity. And the verb definition states to bring shame to or disgrace, to put to shame by outdoing, to cause to feel shame, and or to force by causing to feel guilty. Now, shame is not innate. It's not an inherent part of being human. It's developed through our life experiences. Think about children who are elementary, school age or younger. They tend to say some crazy things out of their mouth. If you're not around younger children, then I am pretty sure you have seen reels or TikTok compilations of children saying some wild stuff. Wow. While much of it, if not all of it, of what the children say is true, it can be quite mean, inappropriate, and unnecessary at times. And they say it without guilt because they have no shame. Keep in mind, guilt and shame differ, but one can lead to the other. Like if a child is corrected, he or she may feel a sense of guilt for the action and apologize. But if they internalize it, that may lead them to feeling shame, like an attack on their character. In other words, feeling like they are a mean person and no one likes them. It's like failing a test. You failed the test and you just failed, okay? But then it turns into I am a failure. That's when the shame comes. When you actually internalize the action that the mishap that you did. Anyway, nonetheless, children, they speak and they operate freely until someone tells them their behavior is mean or unacceptable. If they're never told, then 9 times out of 10, the behavior will continue until it's done to them and they are possibly brought to their own shame. I want to preface that shame is not all bad, but to be clear, it is a negative emotion. But in many cases, it can protect us. Without shame, we may lack motivation to follow cultural norms, obey laws, or act in ways that make social life possible. Now, when it comes to cultural and social norms, that can be a double-edged sword. But I'll get more and speak more on that later in the video. So some of the types of shame that plague the internet are body shaming, poverty shaming, dare I say slut shaming. I'm going to take a deeper look at that one. Not in this video though. I have a general idea of what slut shaming consists of, but I never really entertained or researched it. I just remember some years back Amber Rose was marching for it. I don't pay too much attention to her, so I dismissed it. The topic, that topic may have a video of its own, maybe. Anywho, people are being shamed for being single parents, more specifically mothers, relationship choices, spiritual and religious practices, the list goes on. Many of the pro shamers, more specifically the internet and public shamers, have convinced themselves that They are the poster child of goodness and morality, and that they have the right to shun and humiliate those who look different from them, make poor choices, or people who just simply decided to make choices different from theirs. Much of their actions and rhetoric do not promote a healthy sense of shame. In other words, it doesn't promote humility within the person they claim should be ashamed. Studies show that the impact can be harmful and can lead a person to social withdrawal, lowered self esteem, turn into a people pleasing person, depression, anxiety, and a slew of other destructive ways of being. If they over internalize their shame, it could actually cause them to repeat the shame behavior or worse. So, if shame is so damaging, why do people want to bring it back? So, one reason people want to bring shaming back is for moral regulation, right? Basically, enforcing social norms. Take, for example, the singer Neo. I am not sure when he came out as a participant in the polygamy lifestyle, but I don't think it was too long after his divorce. Christianity promotes monogamy, and while I understand everyone does not identify as such, the ideologies influence our society greatly. It never fails that if Neo or one of his girlfriends post on IG, there are going to be some people in the comments still trying to convince that man and the women that they should be, not be living the lifestyle that they do. They are attempting to bring shame onto him and the ladies in hopes that they will change their ways. But here's the thing, and what I actually can respect is that he has none and is living his life how he sees fit for the moment. Later in life he may see differently, but right now he is living his truth. Shame is what caused him to create 3 broken homes. That's what y'all like to call it, right? 7 children, 3 mothers. Because of social norms, this man made a choice to fake like he was going to be some monogamous husband, and that's not what he was on. He tried to fit into the mold but couldn't. I don't know that man, but I am pretty sure shame is what took him so long to finally live his life aloud. He probably questioned himself, as a man and a father, amongst other things, before he decided to truly live in his truth. Do y'all remember, I believe it was earlier this year, a young lady got pregnant and the pastor had her go in front of the congregation to apologize?
Praise the Lord, saints.
Stand right in front of the congregation. Yeah, right in front of you. Don't touch that table.
I want to apologize to everybody in here because I am pregnant. I'm sorry, y'all. And I just hope that y'all all forgive me and praying for me.
It was sad to see, and in my opinion, unnecessary. It's like watching a humiliation ritual. I am pretty sure that the young lady already felt a sense of guilt and shame. It seems, it seems she's keeping the baby, so the congregation would have found out eventually. She only needs forgiveness from God and herself, and maybe an apology to her. No, I would say an apology to her parents or her guardians. While while they don't have to condone it, and rightfully so, because I don't condone teenage pregnancy either. It is your child, but she will need all the support she can get. The pastor said no baby showers. Okay, okay. If that's your religion, that's what you believe. But once again, they don't have to be okay with her pregnancy or her actions that led to it. But for a lack of better terms, the damage is done. The damage is done. There doesn't have to be a celebration per se, but if that is her village, they should come together and instead of giving gifts, they should donate. She will need all the help she can get, and you know, why make it harder than it has to be just to prove a point? In my opinion, it will probably drive her away from the church down the line. I pray she, never feels alone and does have support, because if not, that could lead to lack of self worth, which is the driving force behind poor relationship choices, which could lead her into the arms of a sorry man that has nothing to offer her but a compliment and some. One thing I have noticed about uber religious churches and households is that they live or attempt to live in this bubble that tends to block reality. They don't like to talk about the birds and the bees or the flowers and the trees. They just say, don't do it because it's a sin and you will go to hell. No nuance to the conversation or, lack thereof, which could cause an adolescent mind to seek information from the outside, from outside sources, i.e., their peers who don't know a damn thing either, just spreading dis and misinformation, or they will experiment without any knowledge, only leading with curiosity, just green as hell. Now, that's why people are not, surprised when the preacher's kid life choices don't always align with the word of God. Then you have exposed culture. This is mostly played out online. One day it's a disgruntled side chick posting pics of someone's man in her bed, then a transgender or gay posting their DMs to expose a hetero man, or an adolescent or young adult recording their parent going off on them. While I do agree, if you are cheating on your partner or you are a bad parent, you should in some sense be called out, but not the way most people go about it online. Because, ma'am, why are you even with cis man in the first place? Have you no shame? If you are parents, if your parents are truly harmful, and I mean truly, not because they said no or won't allow you to do certain things under their roof, I mean harmful. If you are an adult, baby, it's time to move out. You grown, go ahead and go. Don't keep yourself in that situation if you don't have to. If you are a child, seek, that's a tougher one, but seek a trusted family member for help or speak to the school counselor. If it's violent, call the authorities. But in many of these situations I see online, the child was out of line. Many of them show the parents crash out and not what led to it. And they are in for a rude awakening when the internet is not on their side, right? In this instance, the child should be ashamed for trying to expose their parents for some BS. Here's the problem I have with exposing culture. In many of the cases, the exposure should be just as much, if not more, shameful than the person they are exposing. It's hypocritical. This is where I do believe a healthy sense of shame is needed, because shame would have kept you out of that man's bed, or at least prevented you from posting it online to forever being viewed as a side chick or a whore. Now, unhealthy shame is why the so-called hetero man was in the trans or gay man's DMs. He feels bad about himself and knows societal judgment will follow if he lives in his truth. So he sneaks around. He should not feel ashamed though, unless he's in a relationship. There's also the call out holier than thou crowd under the guise of being honest or keeping it real. But who asked you for your opinion in the first place? I know, when it's on the internet, whatever it is, it's susceptible to public opinion. This is where most social users live when it comes to shame. Many just want to spread their misery and prudence and project their personal inadequacies onto others. There's a certain group of people who want people like Tia Mowry and Tracy Ellis Ross to be miserable so bad. It's like their joy triggers them. If they speak on their highs, these people say anything to attempt to bring them down. If they speak on their lows, here come the low vibrational village with their ahas, and that's what you get. It's truly pathetic. Like, pathetic. They want them to feel shame because one is divorced and single, and the other is single without kids. Now, because these women refuse, it really bothers them. Society tells women the ultimate goal is marriage and children by any means. But when that's not someone's ultimate goal, you can't make them feel away. I can't recall how many times I've seen people attempt to shame Sierra. She is over there living her best life with her husband and kids, and that makes some people mad. They want to shame her because she's made a poor choice with whom she had her oldest son with. They feel she doesn't deserve a guy like Russ. They make posts about her dating history. Some are blatantly false, but her public dating history is no more than the average person in their late 30s. The thing is, if these haters had a chance, they would be elated to marry her. They want her to feel shame still, like to this day. I think her son is probably like 12, 13 years old, and they just won't get over it. I don't think her situation is a situation to feel ashamed of. Call me biased, but every poor choice does not require one to feel ashamed of themselves. Disappointment and accepting accountability would be more appropriate. Not being proud of how things turned out is okay. If you went into the situation with a genuine heart, then what's there to be ashamed of? Now, now you just gotta own your part in the situation, evaluate and understand what led to your choices, accept the consequences, and ensure that you do better moving forward. Throughout history, public shaming has taken many forms, such as pillories and public beatings. Public shaming has served as a means to uphold social norms, penalize misconduct, and discourage future violations. It's used for social control. It also possesses significant risk of lasting emotional and social harm, especially in the digital era where its reach and impact can be greatly amplified and live forever. The fictional novel The Scarlet Letter was based on practices performed by some 17th century Puritan communities. Hester, the main character, had sex and had a baby from a man that was not her husband, and was forced to wear the letter A on top of her clothing as a form of punishment and humiliation. The A stood for adulterer. While Hester eventually finds strength within herself and rebuilds her life, it's hard to think that's true for most of the women in real life. Now, pregnancy shame can lead to seeking back alley abortions, and that may be even more true now since Roe versus Wade was overturned. Unsafe abortion is a major cause of injury and death among women worldwide. These include self-induced abortions, abortions in unhygienic conditions, and abortions performed by medical practitioners who do not provide the appropriate post-abortion attention. According to the World Health Organization, 22,800 women die annually as a result of complications of unsafe abortions. Wow. I do firmly believe we have to protect ourselves and be proactive instead of reactive when it comes to pregnancy prevention. I want to focus on the subgroup of women who, if not, was worried about being ridiculed and shunned, they would not have gotten an abortion. Women who, may have not been married, or women who may have been a little younger. It's not that they didn't want the child, they was just more so worried about the shame that would be brought on to them. There are women out there who deeply regret making the choice to terminate their pregnancy. They only did it because of the shame. Speaking of back alley procedures, let's get into the body shaming, which has led to the rise in cosmetic surgeries. While there isn't a statistical number for how many illegal butt enhancement procedures have been performed, legal butt lifts performed in the US has increased by 213% between 2000 and 2016. BBLs have the highest mortality rate among all cosmetic surgeries. I am a person who, wholeheartedly believes everything isn't for everybody. What may look good on you may not look good on me, and vice versa. That is a subjective statement because, how something looks is completely based on, personal preference, and it's an opinion. But however, there is typically a general consensus of what looks good and doesn't. With that being said, even if I don't like the way someone looks, whether it's their face or their shape, unless they ask for an opinion, even then there's a such thing as tact. I will not get on this internet and belittle and speak ill about someone's looks or body. No, not happening. Of course, unless you come for me, then it's fair game. Now, if I said something back in the day on Facebook, I'm sorry. I was young. I know better. But, I really don't believe I have. But anywho, many of you, I believe are just way too comfortable, demeaning people. Just way too comfortable. Body shaming can lead to dysmorphia, body dysmorphia, which affects about 1 in 50 people, causing social anxiety, eating disorders, and low self-esteem. People with low self-esteem often end up looking for validation from others, especially in relationships, making them vulnerable to a toxic partner. Before they know it, they're stuck in a cycle, ending up in a situation that they will be shamed for later on. It's like just going in circles. Body shaming can lead to body dysmorphia, which affects about 1 in 50 people, causing anxiety, eating disorders, and you guessed it, low self-esteem. People with low self-esteem often end up looking for validation from others, especially in relationships, making them vulnerable to a toxic partner. Before they know it, they're stuck in a cycle, ending up in a situation that they will be shamed for later on. A lot of you all talk about and often wonder how people end up in the situations they do, and a lot of it has to do with lack of self-esteem, a lack of understanding who they are, being ashamed for things from when they were younger. And while it's not your responsibility to heal them, that's their own personal thing they got to work on. It's also not your responsibility to demean or talk down on them. If you're not going to be somewhat of an assistance, and you're not going to be you can be critical, but it needs to be productive, but most of y'all aren't productive. But anyhow, I digress. I took a brief break from TikTok, came back, and there were mothers arguing about book bags. I mean, like, let's be fucking for real. Book bags, I will admit, I did not go down the rabbit hole. I saw a few posts, and that was all I needed, because I was not about to have my head spinning and hurting all because of these crazy people. You have parents legit speaking down on parents who won't buy their child a $80 to $200 book bag. Buy what you want. I am guilty of every now and again buying my son something that I believe is drastically overpriced. Very seldom, but I have, you know. But to speak down or clown someone who won't is insane. It's crazy. But in the same breath, if it's not something I am not willing to buy, I won't come for the parent who are. You know, at least not on the internet. You know, leave that at the kitchen table. That's kitchen table talk. Talk about them then, not for the world to see. Classism is a real experience. Many of us feel the effects of it day to day. There are elite subgroups or those with that mindset who look down on those they deem socially, economically inferior. There was a big thing on TikTok where people were giving their takes and others sharing their experiences regarding Jack and Jill. And in no way am I saying the organization as a whole has a superior complex. Could it have started that way? Sure, and it probably did. But I do believe, based on what I've seen, they have evolved. Nonetheless, many people view or experience the organization in that former manner. In my opinion, poverty shaming is what leads most of these parents to purchase things like a $200 book bag for their kids. Well, y'all come for me. If you got it, cool. If your kids make good grades, cool. If it doesn't apply, but many of these teachers are saying these kids are F and F, fresh and failing. But many parents want their kids to have the best. You know, as if a $15 or $30 book bag wouldn't suffice. If you want your kids to have the best, do your best to make sure they get an education. People say they want people to be held accountable, but do they? Do they? You know, take for instance, pregnancy rates are decreasing. While there are, of course, many variables for this decline, one is that people are, no longer wanting to have large families or kids at all. You know, those reasons could be simply due to personal choice, career focus, lack of quality relationship partners available. You know, the list goes on. Anecdotally, some women do not want to follow the footsteps of their foremothers, being barefoot and pregnant. They don't want to get married just for the sake of being able to say they're married, possibly becoming a single married mother. You know, they don't want to have kids for a man or his fictitious legacy. If they want it, they want it on their terms when it's, feels right for them. Acceptance of accountability is ultimately going to be demonstrated by following through. You know, I believe to some degree these stats show a level of accountability, but it's not viewed that way because I truly believe most people prefer to see punishment instead of people actually being held accountable. You know, some people get off on seeing people publicly ridiculed and humiliated. Again, I do believe every now and again, a little sense of shame should hit you if you're about to or are doing something despicable or embarrassing to yourself, your family, or your community. But, overall, do we want shame, accountability, or punishment? Shaming feels like accountability, but rarely leads to the reflection or growth. It shuts people down. Now, feeling guilty can effectively motivate change as that person is acknowledging they did something wrong, right? So, feeling ashamed, honestly, just, for me, feeling ashamed honestly just seems like the equivalent of feeling sorry for yourself. Bring shame back. I don't think shame ever really left, to be honest. I just think a lot of the people they want to shame are comfortable with who they are and refuse to let anyone make them feel bad about their life choices. We all walk different paths with different backgrounds and social and cultural, values, and our social and cultural values will not always align with someone else's. We can't project our personal values on everyone, and we aren't going to act like some of these social norms don't need a touch up. They real old school. Time to touch it up back. Not everyone is religious, so marry before you carry doesn't apply to all. Some people are, elected and dress in ways some might not understand. Some people are fat. And while health matters, let's be for real. A lot of you all don't actually care about that. You don't. If you did, you'd educate with compassion instead of ridicule. Truth is, many of y'all are just bullies. You know, we're just living in a time where, more people are rejecting societal norms and refusing to live in a constant state of shame. Mothers shouldn't feel ashamed for having kids outside of marriage. Guilt or disappointment, sure, if your religion forbids it. Don't feel ashamed for leaving a relationship that isn't working. Men shouldn't be ashamed to show emotion in a healthy way, of course, in a healthy way. People struggling financially shouldn't be looked down on and shamed for, being broke. In most cases. Humans make mistakes and bad choices, and not all of them deserve, public shaming or shame in general. What they do need is to own up to when, accountability is warranted. That said, grown men who signed up for that girl's OnlyFans the second she turned 18, shame, you're nasty. People who enable abusers and the abusers themselves, shame, you ain't shit. So called content creators doing gross or demeaning antics just for clicks, shame, you're nasty, and you ain't shit. I'm not oblivious to shop culture and the money it brings in, but some people will do any and absolutely anything for clicks and views. Virality is currency, I get it. But in cases like licking unbought ice cream in a store or whatever other wild nonsense people, come up with, yes, they should be ashamed. And they should be shamed publicly. Because why? It ain't that deep. Marginalized groups get hit the hardest. Poor folks, fat folks, LGBTQ plus, ooh, I said that right, communities, and black people. These groups are already policed more both in real life and online. So when something happens, whether it's a mistake, a misunderstanding, or just existing in a way society doesn't like, the internet comes down harder on them. For someone with privilege, the same situation might blow over in a week. But for marginalized people, shame can stick to their name for years, impacting jobs, relationships, safety, and mental health. It's not just about the bad thing they did or were accused of. It's about how the internet uses that moment to reinforce, every harmful stereotype that already exists about them. Bring shame back. Like I said before, a lot of the time it's more about people projecting their own self righteousness onto other people, demanding they conform to, what they think is normal or acceptable, regardless of the other person's reality or truth. Sometimes it's not even about morals at all. It's about a subconscious itch to pass harsh judgment over things that, in most cases, don't even affect them. It's the equivalent of wanting someone kicked out the club because you couldn't get in. It's envy. It's envy wrapped in moral outrage. They see someone living in a way they secretly wish they could, whether that's, freedom from certain norms, confidence in their identity, or just not caring about the rules they've tied themselves to. And instead of dealing with that feeling, they label the other person as wrong or immoral or shameworthy. It's less about protecting society and more about making sure no one else enjoys the things they've convinced themselves they cannot have. And in some cases, they had it or did it, they were just better at hiding it. That secrecy stuff. It's just the hypocrisy of it all. Again, shame is not an innate human emotion, so everyone isn't going to have it. Our experiences and social and cultural norms are the driving forces behind the emotion, but as stated before, it can lead to damaging and unpleasant behavior. In my opinion, it is necessary in very small doses because there are things that are just, straight up wrong and morally unacceptable. The urge to shame has become human. But the question is, do we want to be right or do we want to be effective? Shame might, make us feel powerful in the moment, but long term, it often silences, wounds, and isolates. So the next time you're ready to drag someone, ask yourself, is this about healing or am I just trying to hurt? Drop your thoughts in the comments. What do you think about the role of shame today? Should it make a comeback or has it never left? What's your experience with feeling ashamed or are you the shamer? Either way, don't be ashamed to like and share this video. Also, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Until next time, be you always.